Fear Street Prom Queen was directed by Matt Palmer, who wrote it along with Donald McCleary. Yet another Fear Street movie coming to Netflix after the original trilogy based on the books by RL Stine. If his Goosebumps series raised kids in the 90s and 2000s, Fear Street was the cool uncle who let the kids do whatever they want. Reading Fear Street, or pretty much any other R.L. Stine book outside of Goosebumps, made us all realize how tame Goosebumps actually was. This is where things get real. People might actually die. So of course, because of that, the film adaptation of these children's books did the logical thing and put a teenage girl's head through a bread slicer in graphic detail. You know, it's interesting how the Goosebumps movie toned down the horror to the point where it's almost non-existent, and the Fear Street movies went in the opposite direction. Mr. Stine, you are never getting a faithful adaptation again. But anyway, I've already talked about the original trilogy. To sum things up, they all got 3 stars. They're a little cliche and that kind of thing, but as they go on, they get more fun. I don't love them like some do, but they are decent. This one is a major step down. Unlike the trilogy, which was its own story, this was actually based on one of the Fear Street books. No relation to the other movies, it takes place in the 80s at a school prom, and a masked figure is killing everybody who's in the running for prom queen. This is a tribute to the teen slasher films of the 80s, and by tribute, I mean pretty much a total copy. This may be based on a book, but it still feels like a Netflix movie through and through. If you've seen any teen slasher movie, you've seen this. I haven't seen Prom Night, but I presume it's basically what this is, except probably better. Don't quote me on that, but it seems likely. To its credit, it does have some good kills in there. Once again, every children's horror series needs some strong bloody violence and gore, teen drug use language, and some sexual references. Some of the violence is over the top in a way that adds some much needed life to the movie, although most of them are pretty generic. And the script is a little below the average 80s slasher. It's a Netflix movie, and it feels like a Netflix movie. Although I'll admit there were parts where it felt a little more like an R.L. Stine book than the trilogy, which makes sense since this time it actually is. Even down to those fake outs where everybody thinks that something horrible has happened long before it would make sense for something to happen, but then it turns out to be a prank. But then for most of it, it feels more like just a regular R-rated slasher movie that went straight to Netflix. There wasn't much to do with this franchise after the trilogy wrapped up, but they could have at least tried to do something as ambitious. I'm not saying the trilogy was the peak of ambition, but the fact that it was 3 movies released in 3 weeks that spanned 3 different time periods was at least something. At the very least, they could have made another trilogy. But no, we got this. The Netflix was too powerful for this franchise to continue with what made it work. And that's what's really scary.
Coming to KFC. Now get 4 Goosebumps books for just $1.99 each with any purchase, including the mega meal. There's so much food, it's scary. But hurry, it won't be long before Goosebumps books disappear. Don't say you're not hungry.
Bring Her Back is the second film from Australian former YouTubers Danny and Michael Filippo, who recently made their debut in a big way with Talk to Me. Written by Danny Filippo and Bill Hinsman, who also co-wrote Talk to Me. After their first foray into serious horror, which boldly asked the question, what if The Exorcist was also an after-school special, they've done it again, making something possibly even more disturbing. It's about 2 teenagers who are sent to a foster home after the death of their father. But there is some creepy stuff going on there. That probably sounds like the most generic horror movie plot summary ever, but really that's just because you haven't seen how the Filippo brothers put it in action. And of course because I'm not spoiling any of the specifics here. Just that it's pretty messed up. Much has been said about how bleak it is. The highest rated review listed on Metacritic compares it to Martyrs. I don't think it quite reaches that level, but it does get dark. A little bleaker than Talk to Me, which is kind of a high bar. It's also full of things to get under your skin. There are a few scenes that will make you squirm with its violence. And Sally Hawkins makes a good villain as the foster mother. A lot of it involves her gaslighting one of the characters, and it does add more investment to his plight and makes you hate her more. But yet at the same time, she also becomes a little more pitiable near the end. She's a complex character. And another, possibly even bigger standout is child actor Jonah Wren Phillips as the foster brother. He's meant to be a creepy child, and he pulls it off very well. This movie further cements these directors as modern masters of the horror genre, and also further proves that sometimes YouTubers don't suck at making actual movies. This will probably end up being one of the creepiest movies of the year. Who would have guessed that the douchebag YouTubers would be the best thing to happen to A24 horror?